Hello, world, and welcome back to Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name is Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle. And we are going to be going over episode 4 of the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series by John Vervaeke. So I think we're going to open it up with a quote today from Lizelle.
Hello, world. It's actually not from Lazal, it's from Plato. It's a technicality.
Let me play the fool.
um, so it's from Parmenides, I think. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. Okay. So it's Socrates speaking, but it's a young Socrates in this play, or in this dialogue. He met Parmenides, who was a Pythagorean, and they are speaking here. So Socrates is saying, all the same, I have sometimes been troubled by a doubt whether what is true in one case may not be true in all. Then, when I have reached that point, I am driven to retreat for fear of tumbling into a bottomless pit of nonsense. Anyhow, I get back to the things which we were just now speaking of as having forms and occupy my time with thinking about them. That, replied Parmenides, so the wiser older man, is because you are still young, Socrates, and philosophy has not yet taken hold of you as firmly as I believe it will some day. You will not despise any of these objects then, but at your present, your youth makes you still pay attention to what the world will think. So, to me, what I read in that is that a deep love of wisdom sometimes makes us go places where the world might think we shouldn't go.
Yeah, in our own mind, I guess, because it can feel really existential. That's kind of why we were saying that the tether here is really important, because this is the part of thought that gets creepy when you look underneath the forms, I guess, or at least that's what they were exploring further.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we didn't get to cover too much of Pythagoras on the last uh, discussion that we had where it was mentioned. I guess he was mentioned more so in episode 3, because this one he goes really deep into Socrates, which is nice. But there was already a discussion about Pythagoras, and the kind of thing that I wanted to highlight, because this has become kind of something for me to review later. I think I'll be able to get into this mindset again, visit with this mindset. But I think the things that we wanted to highlight about Pythagoras was, well, I was mentioning the acceptation of the shamanistic soul flight idea. And also, you were mentioning some really great points about seeing patterns in reality, which was the purpose of the music and geometry and mathematics. And so, understanding the world as the formulas showed up for him. So, he's thinking about life in a different perspective. So,
Yeah.
the other important person to mention when we talk about Plato is, of course, Socrates. And we want to first preface Socrates and how he is even more special than just having influence over Plato.
Yes.
Well, I guess
Well,
through having influence over Plato. I got really magical there and put it on a big pedestal.
I just want to actually talk about my relationship with Socrates, how I got dragged into his world or something like that. So, um, in I never really liked Socrates, quite honestly. Like I when I read about him, I was like, oh yeah, I can see that this guy is really um, interesting. And it's a great. I can see why he's called a sage. Um, but when I read Plato, I was like, "Ugh." I can see why this guy was condemned to death for being annoying. And like we said before we started, I said, can you imagine how annoying someone must be to be condemned to death? And you said, like, yeah, for that purpose, like, yeah, you have to be really annoying to be condemned to death for being annoying. So, but I could see that. So I really struggled reading Plato. Also, I found Plato quite dull, quite honestly. And it feels like sacrilege to say that now, but I did. And he's quite a dictator as well, Plato sometimes. So I could never really get into either of them, Socrates or Plato, until in March 2020, I was introduced to the work of John Vervaeke. And so I watched his series for the first time and I joined his online meditation course. And by May 2020, I was posting on Facebook that I found a Socrates. Like amongst all the sophists, which we will get to later, the sophist, I found a Socrates. And I don't know why exactly I said that. It's just like I'm quite perceptive, I've been told. I see and I just noticed patterns that John had that when I read about Socrates, I saw I saw it there as well. So I just picked up on that. And it was fun. John was Socrates, a playful metaphor, nothing more than that, until Plato came on my radar. And with Plato, then I mean Christopher Mastro Pietro. And when the two of them combined, when it was like, and I had a symbol or a metaphor for Socrates, and I had a metaphor for Plato. Plato was more Christian himself is not. I wouldn't call Plato, but in relationship to John, I would. He's very much Plato. His own philosophy is richer or different than just the Platonic philosophy. But so anyway, when the two of them combined, something happened, and these metaphors for Socrates and Plato became really powerful symbols. Now, later in the series, we will deal with symbols. So probably, or it could be that when we talk about the technicalities of symbols, it will be like, no, I misunderstood it. I see it, but this is anyway how I experience symbols. Um, I don't love John because he reminds me of Socrates. I love Socrates because I see him through the lens of John, through John as a symbol. And the same for Plato. I don't love Christopher because I love Plato, but I've learned to love Plato because I see him through Christopher. And that is the power of symbols. It uh, Now when I read Plato and I look at Socrates, I hear him speak, I hear the kindness that I see in John, which is cultivated kindness. I think it's kindness as a virtue, not kindness as a personality trait. um, the warmth, the generosity, and the the honest search for truth and wisdom. I see that now in Socrates, which previously I just couldn't see before I had this symbol of John. So John and Christopher opened this whole world to me. So I just wanted to give recognition to that for them as symbols. That's yeah.
Nice. That opens us up to Socrates because now we're going to have some beef with John. So it was worth
We love you, John. We do, but
Oh, okay. So I love mythology, and so I love that there was an exploration of this story behind Socrates, and of course, um, yeah, I mean, I didn't know too much about Socrates. I hardly knew about the Socratic method personally. So, yeah, we just wanted to start with that story, and then that leads us into how he's exploring the results of, I guess, the myth. Um, so, because I guess Socrates kind of seems mythical in that his story was told in different ways. So,
yeah, I guess it depends on who you read.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So, could you then go into the myth of when he visits or when they visit the
Oh,
oracle about?
That is probably not a myth. That's
Okay, so
probably
this is
real.
an
That
account.
probably
Okay,
really happened. I think it's not just
cool.
Plato that gives that, or I don't even. Yeah, Plato in his Apology, the Apology, uh, Socrates talks of this, but I think it is what was more commonly known in the ancient world that actually happened.
Okay, okay.
So you, because you're referring to his friends that as a joke, and obviously you can see the first beef that we have, went to the oracle. And then the oracle said, they asked the oracle, is there anyone wiser than Socrates? And she said, no, there is no human being wiser than Socrates. And awesome story. But we both felt a bit, uh, what's the word you used? A bit,
I thought it was a little condescending, though dismissive of the oracle reading and the priestess and how pivotal this shift
yes,
was in his thinking.
yes. Because what people who watch this might have noticed that we we're dressed in costume, and the reason why we're dressed in costume is because we were like, we want to do this in as well. We all play certain different roles in life, right? But we both play a role that we like. We want to do this as those roles, and the roles that we are choosing is the oracle and the high priestess, which is other names for Pythia. So yeah. So when he speaks of her in a condescending way, we somewhat feel attacked.
Yeah, we picked up on this separately, so that was
Yeah.
interesting. Both of us obviously reviewed the video separate and then come together to talk about it, and that was something that we both picked up on separately was that, well, I found it funny that this is the only thing that we're going to ever believe of the oracle, but this is so definitely true. Like it causes, Socrates
Yeah.
an existential crisis. And I even thought it was funny that now, John, after having discredited this kind of woo woo, line of thinking, like he even says, as an oracle, you don't want to be straightforward with your answer. It's like,
Mm,
it's not that though. You're
no.
describing something beyond words. And even
Yeah.
we've been discussing as we've been going through this series how that was a whole psychotechnology that was developed to
Yeah.
even think in this kinds of,
Symbolic way.
yeah, to think in the
Because
symbolic
it's,
way and then also
yeah.
to think in the kind of, well, we haven't even developed the logical really through
Mm,
this. So that
yeah.
kind of thinking with those symbols that the oracle is using isn't just whatever. She's just pulling shit, out of her
No.
ass because she wants to have continued customers, right, or people coming back.
No. 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 It's much more complicated than
Right.
that. We were also talking before recording, like if you do get visions, it's not as simple as that as well. You don't uh, for two reasons that's very obvious. Like the visions aren't like clear and like it's clear, but it's not like this extended visions. So it's you do see only a squirrel chasing an acorn, and then, well, if there's men who wants to interpret it, then let them, but
Yeah.
but that's only, and so that's the message that the gods are giving, and that's, if you want to be faithful to the goddesses, or Apollo was the god there, then you should only give that. So that's the one thing, and the other thing is, um, I do, um, John's exactly words is, I don't think that people can actually foresee the future in any supernatural kind of manner. I love the fact that he uses supernatural, because I already said previously that I do not like this term.
Yeah.
So I
That's an
agree
irrelevant term.
with his exact choice of words. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
But Um, I do think that there is a reality beyond space and time, or space time. I call it eternal, and I'm not the only one. It's not my original idea. Um, and I do think that uh, it is somehow possible sometimes to access the eternal, or rather, better said, for the eternal to access us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not nothing supernatural, but then if you're beyond space time, then there's not really anything stopping you from seeing. Um, and this is just one way of prophesying, of course, like actual visions. The other one is picking up on patterns, what we also
Yep.
talked about, which is both of us are more inclined to that, the picking up of patterns.
Right, right. Yeah. Pythagorean,
And
if we're to apply credit somewhere.
yeah. And so, and the other thing about what we see is that I have learned that if something is seen that is happening within a short time frame, it's usually exactly like you see it. But if something happens over a few years, there's small changes, because destiny is a little bit amendable.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted to quote two two lines from my favorite movie again. I think both are very relevant in this. And then we can, unless you still have something to say about the oracle, we
Okay,
can.
we can move on from it. Yeah. That's good. That's good. Yeah. I need to
um,
leave it behind.
unless you still want to say something,
No,
but
no, no. Yeah. I loved how you really emphasized that the Eternal has access to us, and then to only give the message as it is given to you. Like, I mean, what you're asking someone to do to extrapolate further onto something downloaded or something that they've had a vision of, you're asking them to describe further using words to articulate something that they've seen. So, of
yeah,
course, it never
no,
comes out exactly as it
no,
is.
no.
So, and I get the whole idea of being more vague so that it can apply to more people. But the whole point of the oracle, and I think this has been mentioned before, or people that give prophetic messages, is to analyze where you are now and to move
Mm,
forward, you know, well, if we're thinking in time, being
yeah,
chronological.
yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I'm just gonna leave it there.
But
But
that's a pattern recognition. You look at the patterns from the past, you look at the patterns in the present, and then you just predict what's you know to me it seems all very rational. It's
right,
like
straightforward.
very straightforward.
Yeah.
But as the oracle, then, or no, you're the oracle, as a priestess, then I would like to give this message, and it has to be in an Italian accent
Yes.
because it takes place in Italy, but I cannot do an Italian accent.
Uh,
So just use your imagination. So the one line, oh, let me just say it as one. The truth is, you make your own destiny, and it is written in the stars. Capiche?
Capiche. Yes. Uh, okay. All right. So we've talked about now how Socrates has gone to or well, has learned from the people that relayed this message from the oracle that the gods find him to be the wisest human. And then, so he's going to explore this now. He wants
Yes,
to explore this because he takes it to heart. He
seriously.
takes this deeply into consideration. So if we're, you know, going to all hail Socrates, then it's important to recognize that oracle message had power. That was kind of the existential uh, thought that I had about it. So, but again, I'm going to leave it there. So now he's going.
Was Socrates really the wisest person, or was the fact that the oracle told him that he was that made him go on this quest, and it made him the wisest person?
living up to the potential. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's what you're talking about. Like there's a little wiggle room there. Had he never gotten that message,
yeah,
would the future of Socrates had looked the same as
yeah,
having, you know, gotten that message? Because that leads us into, I mean, I guess this is where he starts to interact with the sophists and the natural philosophers and starts
yeah,
to pick at this idea of
yeah,
him being the wisest.
yeah. So the thing is, he's like perplexed. It's like, am I the wisest? Like, so he's searching for all the people that are known or uh, known to be wise, the people who other people see as wise, and that is the natural philosophers and the sophists. So then he's going into conversation with them. The natural philosophers lived a few hundred years before him, so I imagine he's just looking at their views. There's one, Anaxagoras or something like that,
Yeah.
that is in his time. So I think it's more that he's looking at their views and their schools than them in particular or personally. But so he's searching for other wise people to compare himself. That's what's going on there.
And these people that he's seeking this from, so they're two different groups. They're the natural philosophers and then the sophists. And the natural philosophers uh, pursued truth but with no relevance, and the sophists disregard the truth for bullshit.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the natural philosophers and truth without relevance. What does that mean? Or I guess, how do we get there? If you care
Well,
to go that way.
I think John makes it really like a good way for us to understand it is like he also refers to how many people nowadays, some in unhealthy ways, see science today as truth without relevance.
Yep.
Um, because yeah, we have all these facts, but it doesn't change our lives. It doesn't transform us. It doesn't help. We know all these things, but it doesn't. So then a lot of people reject science, which is not. I'm sure I know for a fact he won't, and we neither do we want to reject science. But so that is the whole thing there. Like, yeah, it's true, but so what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how does that change my life? How does that change me? How does that transform me? So that's the problem then with just only this natural philosophers. It's very interesting to know ontology. That's the word, right?
Yeah, that's a word that we
That we wanted to.
yeah, the
Uh, yes,
terminology to define.
yes. But well, actually, I can find ways how that can transform me. That's also because I was thinking of particular people when I was thinking of these two groups. And of course, Richard Dawkins comes to mind just because he's like the hardcore scientist. But then I was like thinking, see, that's also kind of like there's no black and white. There's always gray. Like, and there's no this person is only for truth and no relevance because Richard Dawkins has wrote beautiful books on how to live a meaningful atheistic life. So he
He
is also. Hmm?
coined the term meme, right?
Yeah,
So he
yeah,
even has that idea of passing messages through
yeah,
a big, story or
yeah,
whatever, something more backing this idea, and memes evolving like genes do. So,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's like he's definitely not completely taking relevance away.
Yeah, but maybe it would be then scientists who we don't know about who is just concerned with the truth, because if like he is relevant, obviously, because people read him.
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah.
For me, this is kind of the relationship that I had with getting a degree in biology,
Mm.
is that I realized that we were just naming things, putting that stuff into order. None of this is like 100% true. It's all most parsimonious for
Mm.
evolution. And then for my capstone discussion class, we were talking about God and evolution. And my instructor, my professor for that was really cool. I remember ultimately one of the discussions we had this epiphany moment of, it all comes down to who you can trust. If you had a bad experience in a church as a kid, you probably don't trust the church.
Yeah.
If you had a bad experience with a science teacher at some point in your life, you probably don't
Mm.
trust the scientific community. So yeah, that's I mean, there I don't know, I just have had rug pull moments, as I call them, in my life where I've realized I was indoctrinated into believing something. And so, yeah, I mean, that goes into the bullshit part of it too. But for me, the one of those experiences wasn't just religion, wasn't just like my philosophy of how to live my life outside of the corporate world, but one of those actually was science being
Ah,
propaganda. Not in
mm,
this way where I discredit what science has given us. I'm not somebody that's anti-science. I'm a scientist at heart, but I have that more inquiry-based approach to science that's not just what we can measure. I'm
mm,
now much more interested in the philosophy of science and
yeah.
yeah, those like structures around it as opposed to just naming things and categorizing them and putting them in order.
And naming things as it is appropriate to the politics of the time.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, um, truth without relevance. That's kind of the big billboard
yeah,
statement that I got from that
yeah.
part of his discussion. And
Yeah, and
then,
then we talked how he throws in terms that will come in later
yeah,
in the
b-
series. He's just like
dropping them.
appetizers. Yeah, like
Exactly. And I like that approach to learning. What I've
yeah.
noticed a lot about this is that meta perspective of my own pedagogical model, like how I
Mm-hmm.
learn.
Mm,
It's becoming more conversational. I'm less, you know, feeling the concern of I don't know everything about Plato. I don't know everything about Socrates prior to coming to the discussion. Like I don't feel like I have to have that information anymore. It's much more conversational now, the way that I'm learning. And
mm,
so dropping a couple of words here and there, it's like developing a new language and
very much.
continuing those pathways.
Yeah.
That's why now I mean this whole time it's felt like we're like I keep referring to the analogy of cave diving where we've got this kind of line that we're holding on to and you're the one that's kind of off in the cave exploring and you'll come down and check with me every once in a while because I'm still on the line like really holding tight like I can't get away from this thing. So yeah, I noticed myself trying to attach to a previous style of learning that is instructive lecture style and in fact what I'm getting from John, but
Yeah.
what we're this addition the like I love how you decided that we were going to call this practicing
Yeah.
awakening because that is what I feel like is happening is because we're continuing on this train of thought, then I'm kind of learning it in different ways, subconsciously learning it. Like there are patterns here that I'm adhering to that aren't part of the discussion.
Mm. I want to play with your analogy a little bit and um, express how for me how inspiring it is for me to know that there's someone in the cave with me, and that really inspires me to go deeper. Because I know, oh no, this other person really wants to go deep as well. So I have to go explore a little deeper than I would have otherwise on my own, because that's her expectation, and I
Mm,
have to live up to her expectation. So I also benefit greatly from this analogy that you have of the cave diving, and indeed it's like I can see myself in there as my role as well. It really helps me a lot as well.
nice,
So,
nice. Okay.
and yeah, I was thinking the whole thing while we're doing this, because uh, yeah, it's of course to develop wisdom. And the quote from John, because he keeps also dropping all these, what is wisdom? The wisdom and definition in this one is: wisdom is to keep your truth machinery and your relevance machinery tightly coupled together. And that's what we're trying to do, right? That's with
Yeah.
going through this series.
Yeah, I want to mention something that we mentioned before we started recording, which was that realization of us kind of, and we're going to get more into this, I think. Maybe this is a little too early to jump the gun on it, but about confirmation bias and how we're having the discussion also. And you're saying like it's helping you to explore even further into the cave, which doesn't seem like a bad or way for confirmation bias to arise is if you're still in that process of exploration, but there is a little bit of, oh, this is interesting, and this
Yeah.
is something that, is a place that other people explore. We don't talk about this side of the mind anymore
Yeah.
because we're not around community in villages around a
Mm.
fire or always interacting with one another. So those conversations that we kind of get to have by ourselves are not illuminated as much.
Yeah.
So,
And I want to point out then, it was actually a good point to bring in the confirmation bias. We chose each other because we are similar in our biases, like
mhm,
towards the suprasensual and the abilities of human beings to be able to pick up on things maybe that we don't understand, and things like that. But we chose John's work
yeah.
to challenge those biases, because yes, we're going into this together, and sometimes, like today, it was both of us were just feeling really strongly like, mm, like
Yeah.
maybe when we get to 35 or I don't know what, we'll be like, oh yeah, no, that fifth
John's
year.
always right. Or,
We're
yeah,
open to that.
right.
But for now, we had to just like be biased together, like
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good feeling to attract in the, I don't know, the philosophy or the things that you want to explore in the mind space because it's so lonely. That was one of the things
Yeah.
that I said in collective journaling when I first joined was, oh, this is the others. And I think even Peter has said that in describing like what it is. It's just a place where the others are. And I love taking on these characters of the priestess and the
Yeah.
oracle because this feels like a place. The virtual spaces that we go to now, the internet is a place. It's the, the place where we meet. The Stoa is a place that we go to. And so, yeah, I like embodying this in this whimsical way too, and bringing that into the fun, the play.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of a lead up to recognizing the fact that we can bullshit ourselves in our, even in this exploration of like combating our ideas, we're choosing to join forces against anyone that will come against a supracentral um, feeling.
I think this actually, it just occurred to me that this perfectly illustrates Socrates and his interaction with people. But we'll get to that when we get to Aporia.
Okay, okay, okay.
Um,
Take us slow.
yes. So the sophist, because when I mentioned in May 2020 that I found Socrates amongst the sophists, I didn't have Plato's or Socrates' negative view of the sophist. I saw it as people who travel and teach for money. So in
Mm,
my mind then, and I'm not sure that it's changed, Jordan Peterson is a sophist, and Sam Harris is a sophist. These people were sophists. But if anyone says that Jordan Peterson doesn't have a regard for the truth, they haven't listened to anything that Jordan Peterson said. And
yeah.
I don't know Sam Harris that well, but I assume the same. I assume he also regards truth. So I must be wrong about sophist then. So I can't use them as examples of sophist anymore, because the whole thing about sophists is they just don't care about the truth, and that is bullshit. That having no regard for truth.
I've
Yeah.
it's funny because you know about my little moment with Sam Harris, and I think he
Yes.
might have caught some of this that we're about to describe. So just when it comes to
Ooh.
his Trump derangement syndrome, but carry
Oh.
on.
So there's one page in this book that has like a lot of definitions of bullshit. So it's unconnected to a concern with truth, mindlessness, speaking thoughtlessly without conscientious attention to relevant facts, not wrought with the greatest care. And then 38. Yeah. It's just the same thing, basically. So that is a cute little book, this, but I think if you listen to John, you basically get the important message. The essence of bullshit is not that it is false, but that it is phony.
Mm,
And I see I said NB61. By virtue of this, bullshit is a greater enemy of the truth than lies are.
yeah. Yeah, because it's intentional. Um, well,
Well,
not that lies.
it has no regard for truth. It's like, yeah, you just don't care about truth. When you
Right.
lie, at least you know that in order to manipulate the truth, to falsify the truth, um, you have to care about the truth. You have to know that something is true and care about that. And bullshit is just like, it's irrelevant. Truth is irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, there's the truth over there, but we're still going to talk shit while we're over here.
Yeah, I think the famous quote is like, the opposite of love is not hate. It's apathy,
Yeah. Indifference,
or
apathy.
indifference. Yeah, and that's what bullshit is.
Yep.
It's indifference. So it's it's the opposite of truth in the real sense, more so than lies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is, it's interesting to have that term bullshit. And this is what the sophists were. So they're almost kind of, the way I thought about them after this description was kind of like attorneys or just people that were really good with debate, people that could argue for one side in the morning and then go out in the evening
Mm.
and then argue another side. It kind of reminds me of lobbyists a little bit. Um, and that's kind of, I mean, lobbyists are what run our elections here in the States at the
Yeah,
least. So it's a good
yeah,
analogy.
yeah. Our culture is steeped in bullshit. That's
Steeped in it. Yeah.
that's for sure. And that is indeed why we need a man like Socrates. And that is indeed why we need John Vervaeke, in other words. And I do want to mention, despite our beef that we have, every great man needs an oracle and a priestess behind him, and he has an oracle and a priestess in
Very
us.
true. Yep. Got lucky. We're forgiving.
Well, we have to, because Sancta Sophia really likes him. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a good
yeah,
check on our own biases when we are
exactly. Yeah,
engaging in our own
yeah,
biases. And
yeah.
yeah. And so something else that I got about bullshit is kind of it's the way that the story is told. And this is why advertising is so powerful. Well, maybe not why it's so powerful, but it's a, metaphor. It's a way to also think about it with advertising and just the way that you say something. He talks about it in politics in that great Simpsons quote of how political speeches sound. They just kind of have the ups and the downs, the inflections, and the words, the right words are used that give you that feeling that somebody's actually going to do something. And then advertisements have that same effect on us where they're going to make life better. You go to, yeah, you buy this beer. He does give that example of buying a particular kind of beer and then having that experience that you see in the commercial or in the shampoo commercial. And yeah, it's so persistent in our culture now.
Yeah.
So there's science or there's bullshit. Truth without relevance or bullshit. And these are the people that Socrates is exploring himself through. People that participate in that.
Truth without relevance is the natural philosophers,
Mm-hmm.
and relevance without truth is
Mm.
the sophists, the bullshitters. And
Yeah.
the thing is, these are the only people he had to compare himself to try to figure out if he is wise. And I think at the end he did come to the conclusion that maybe the oracle was right. You know, if these are the other human beings, like uh, At least I know I do not know anything except how to love properly. Ta eratica, or
And
something
that
like
was
that.
the kind of culminating message, I guess, that he got from that is that there was something that he knew that he didn't know, and that's what made him wise.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
He he knew that he didn't know. And that was what he tried to, when in his conversations with people,
Mm-hmm.
he tried to bring them to the point, uh,
Yep.
every time, like, just acknowledge that you don't know. And that is that aporia then that
Yeah.
we said we're gonna get to.
Yeah.
So
Here
I'm
we are.
gonna hmm?
I said, here we are. That
Yeah.
happened naturally.
And first I wanted to say, like, because what I had, the thought that came to mind just as you were speaking about our reaction to John, it's like that is so typical of Socrates and how people responded to
Oh,
Socrates.
yeah.
It's like, right? It's like we're like, now we now feel offended. It's like,
That was something that you mentioned too, was we could choose to be offended or intrigued.
yeah. In this particular instance, we feel a bit offended, but most of the time we feel intrigued.
Yeah.
So otherwise, we won't be doing this anymore. So if we stopped after this one,
That's
that
why.
that would be a really bad on us. That would be us being really not
Right.
good followers of Socrates. So yeah, so that came to mind. But what I wanted to mention about aporia, um, I'm not sure exactly when they started. Oh, it was just after I decided to commit myself to the work of John. So it was June, early July 2021. They started having these dialectic into dialogos courses. And with they, I mean John and Christopher and Guy Sengstock. And I want to mention, they never mention her, but I've attended two of these, and she is like really like running the show and such a great spirit. Like, so I do want to mention Corinna Reinhardt as well. They should give her more credit. She's really an awesome woman, and she does play a big role in these events. They don't give enough credit. So they have these dialectic into dialogues where you get to practice this Socratic way of searching for the truth. And when I was thinking about that and the aporia that you then sometimes experience there, the image came to me of how you're standing with your face towards the unknown, and something is pressing you from behind. This conversation is pressing you from behind, deeper and deeper into the unknown. But the unknown is normally pushing back, so you keep your balance. And I I was the first. I was like, yeah, but shouldn't it makes more sense to say you're standing with your back to the unknown, because the unknown you can't see it. But that's the whole thing about these dialectic and dialogos practices. They make you turn around to face the unknown. And that is what Socrates did as well. He made people turn around to face the unknown. So that's why you're with your face in the unknown and you're getting pressed by Socrates with all these questions, getting pressed deeper and deeper into in the unknown. And sometimes you fall in. And that is aporia. Like, just like that point where you're like totally like, now I really don't know.
Mm,
Like, and sometimes aporia is like, just like, but sometimes it's like, like complete terror,
yeah.
not knowing. Um, so yeah, that could also be a really, so that also explains why people decided to get rid of the poor man.
Yeah, he's asking a lot of questions. Yeah,
Which is
especially
also
in,
something you shouldn't do today.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking like in a time where you could be condemned to death. Well, I mean, him for being annoying.
Yeah.
Um, but also just questioning anything, questioning especially the narrative, the what's,
Yeah.
established. And
Yeah.
when you're questioning God or what exists, I think there was even mention of how I don't remember if it was Thales or somebody else that talked about how the sun wasn't a god. Maybe I'm wrong about the philosopher that it was. The sun was a
Uh,
molten rock instead.
I think it was Anaxagoras, the one in Socrates' time.
Yeah.
I think he
And
said that.
Exagoras, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So the sun was a hot rock and not a god. And I even wrote in my notes about this. Thank God I get to choose. Thank God I get to
Um,
choose if I'm going to believe it's a hot molten rock, which I
yeah.
do. I mean, I just want to make that clear as an astrologer. I do believe that we revolve around the sun and all those things. I use the astrology to, you know, metaphorically describe these things to me in my head. But yeah, like Socrates could be condemned for saying these things out loud. And
Yeah.
that, like, facing the unknown like that is very powerful, very courageous. Just speaking your mind, just
Mm,
illuminating your thoughts to the public is
mm,
already brave in itself. And
mm,
I find that interesting that I don't know, I mean, it's described as a that awe, that feeling of awe. You're so
yeah.
mesmerized by something, but also so terrified of it.
Yeah.
Because when you do hit those moments of like if you ever like sit with yourself and question deeper into your reality by yourself or just with your cat and then your cat becomes an alien all of a sudden like you know like you can go to really weird places of
Yeah.
what if these patterns that I see in the world don't continue as they are once I
Yeah.
have that
Yeah.
you know um reflection on them once I've seen them what if they no longer will continue the way that they are anyway I think that
Yeah.
it can like really take you into terrifying places when you don't know um what's under all that so
Yeah.
yeah
The type of questions Socrates asked were more um, to get people to examine their life. So it was less ontological questions, less about the
mm,
structure of reality. It was
okay
more about, uh, well, the ultimate structure, like what is goodness and what is justice, and but the virtues specifically. And when we in these weekends, the dialectic into dialogos, which I really recommend, it's like a spiritual retreat. It's really an experience, a greatly transformative experience. So I do recommend. I'll send you a link
okay yeah
to
then we can put that in the
the
comment
yeah.
because yeah I want to see what that's about too
Yeah. I want to do it again, but yeah, they said they're gonna make different layers, and I've done the first one twice, and I probably will do it one more time, the first one, just to see how they change it because they keep changing it because it keeps growing and evolving.
hmm
And yeah, anyway, but then in that they uh, you examine a virtue. So because the idea is also to be relevant and to be transformative, the truth. It should change you. It should enrich your life. It shouldn't just be questions about irrelevant things. It's
hmm
questions about things that actually um, makes you into a good person. That is the ultimate goal.
nice
Um,
yeah that's a lot different explore because I yeah that I mean that's kind of where I get to in my existential thinking is and I think probably other people can relate with that feeling of I don't know the rug getting pulled out or yeah just I don't know reality breaking versus okay and I think that that's the point it's like okay now you introduce some transformation into that and it makes it something you can work with so if
mm,
you can use that discovery to now uh be virtuous like okay you realize death is
mm,
imminent okay maybe do something with your life that
mm,
can um mitigate that a little bit or at least participate in life in
yeah,
some kind of way
yeah. I think a lot of people. I think well, a lot of things when you say the rocks being pulled out, I think that brings me back to that Kairos moment. I really
mm.
do think we're living. Zach Stein has the reference at time between worlds, and it's a complicated time to live in because what is true? Well, it's we are so confused about truth today that there is almost no rug to be pulled out from under us,
Oh yeah right
and that's again why we need a Socrates. So I think we covered basically everything.
Yeah, somehow we got to that point in the conversation where we had already covered everything, even though there was so much. This is a
Yeah.
really rich episode about Socrates
Yeah.
because there's
But
like so much about him.
also John just like really tells the story of Socrates so well that I
Hmm.
would feel like doing it injustice by trying to do it myself.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. There was no recapping that, but there was a lot of
no.
relating with it. A lot of
Yes.
relating with the story of Socrates. And so I'm interested to get into Plato. And yeah, obviously, like I didn't skip ahead, I didn't skip to the next video, but um, yeah, I feel good about my understanding of Socrates now. I love exploring deeper into the biography of these, well, characters, I guess. Because, well, we were talking about with John and his speaking about Socrates today, and we were kind of like, I felt, we said offended. I think that's a good way to describe it, as the oracle and the priestess. And it felt like, but he was embodying a little bit of
He was
Socrates from
very much embodying
having
Socrates in this
explored
one.
and from regurgitating all this information about him. And it's so interesting to take on the likeness after you've explored that mindset. And you have said that, he goes different directions and maybe even has lightened up a little bit since then. Who knows, about his perspective on um, telling the future through.
I don't think on that he's lightened up, but on he I heard him say that there's a lot of things that he would have done differently, but that's
Mm,
more like he apologized to someone for giving saying that something is Thomas Aquinas when it was actually the followers of Thomas Aquinas, things like that.
I see.
And I
Okay.
also know he's been in conversation with Jonathan Pajot and Paul van der Klee, who are both Christians. So he's and Jonathan Pajot is of course all about the symbolic world,
Uh huh.
and so he's softened towards that, like the
Okay.
religious perspective. And in my mind, for me at least, the religious perspective include the possibility of having receiving messages from the eternal.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's good.
But I think it was very, very interesting how he embodied Socrates in this one, and how we embodied the people with whom Socrates.
That's so cool. That's so cool how the soul of the conversation continues. Like
Yes.
the discussion about things, that's what it allows for, is the continued development of those thoughts through the
Mm,
entities that are going to embody the
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. He actually also does this on purpose.
Mm.
He calls it internalizing the sage. So he
Oh.
does put a lot of work into embodying Socrates. For us, it was kind of like we just felt offended and like, hey, we're just like the people Socrates spoke to. But he actually puts a lot of work into embodying Socrates. And for one thing, for instance, I think I heard him once because someone asked him, like, he does a lot of these external work pro bono. Like Socrates, one of the things that distinguished him from the sophists is he didn't accept money for his
Mm.
teaching. And yeah, just the spirit of Socrates. I really can't mention exactly what patterns I picked up
Yeah.
of Socrates, but I saw it. And in Jonathan Pajot, I experienced Jesus Christ. So because that is the sage that he tries to embody, like
Yeah.
so the so it's that is a practice in the tradition to do
Yeah, you
that.
can strive for that, and that's
Yeah,
kind of, yeah, that ideal that you're striving for, and that's kind of setting out the virtues that you pursue or the
yeah,
practices that you do daily,
yeah,
is
yeah.
what's that, yeah, ideal, or what's net, I don't know, what's good. What do I find, or I guess that's not a good way, because you can explore darker archetypes, and those are fun too, the trickster gods, the, like you can embody um And I don't know. Well, I was thinking like bad things. You can do bad things. There needs to be. Okay, well, here's a great example. Richard
Well,
Rudd with the Gene Keys mentions Judas.
mm,
And what if Judas uh, loved God so much and loved Jesus so much that he performed the role of being the
mm,
betrayer
mm,
to embody that uh,
yeah.
story so that it came
I
through, so
feel
that it actually happened?
I feel really sorry for Judas. I've been feeling sorry for Judas like since I was a teenager because someone had to do it.
Yeah.
Someone had to do it, and he was actually making a huge sacrifice so that this story could unfold. It's yeah, but that is why this other book from Harry Frankfurt, this dude has a really good sense of humor. That's probably why he termed the technical, he coined the technical term bullshit. Uh, yeah, it's and that is what Socrates meant when he said he knows how to love. He knows what to care about, and what we care about. This is comes from this book, kind of like what we care about shapes our lives and shapes our characters because those are the things that we pursue. So if you say like, yeah, we can pursue the good or the evil, it's like, but what do you care about?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is what you will pursue.
Yeah, it
And
takes me back to when Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Pageau, and John Vervaeke were speaking about. I guess Jordan's kind of next book or something like that. But anyway, they started talking about how somebody could aspire to be the best serial killer.
mm,
Yeah, so that's what that took me to.
yeah.
I'm going a little dark with my thoughts now. I don't know where that came from.
Well, it's probably the gods that's rebelling against Socrates for making them all making them all virtuous and good. It's like, no. Yeah.
That was something that I don't think we got too far into, but that
No.
was interesting. I didn't know that Socrates did see that the gods couldn't lie. Like he saw them as
Mm,
very virtuous characters. And
mm,
my okay, because I was just mentioning like trickster gods and like
yeah.
the way that I look at the gods and goddesses, they're always up to no good.
Yeah.
Even if they're like doing it in an all right way, they're always they in Greek mythology, they've always got some kind of
Yeah.
extra thing going on, with the exception I think of Hesta. So
She's a pretty good
Vesta,
one.
Hestia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, my problem with that is if we, which I do, if we see the gods as archetypes within ourselves and we make them all good and all pure, then we're bullshitting ourselves in that as well. Like, because we are not all good and all pure. And we don't only have like all these nice archetypes. We do have the more the ones that needs caution to be handled with caution.
And it's interesting because we're recording this prior to the midterms in the States, and we'll be releasing it after the midterms are completed. But that's a great place to see that we honestly expect, I think, too much out of our politicians, and they overcompensate in the bullshit department. They're going to overcompensate for what they're not capable of doing by this rhetoric, by saying stuff without any substance behind it, because otherwise they're not electable. If
Yeah.
you admit to fault, if you admit to not being, you know, everything that's the expectation now, which is completely unrealistic because now we've gotten into a perpetual pattern of rhetoric where it's just the same words recycled over and over again in this,
Yeah.
way of speaking. So
Twirling, twirling.
yeah, I want to be a baseball. That makes sense. So now all of America wants to be baseballs. But yeah, that's another.
Yeah, I do before if we're gonna end, I don't know
Yeah.
if you wanna then I
Yeah.
wanna
I mean,
read
we're
the
naturally
passage.
kind of fizzing out because
Yeah.
yeah, this was a big long discussion about Socrates. We've kind of you've said this before in our coven meetings that it feels like we've talked about all of this even though we haven't actually had the discussion.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, I think, fruit for thought here, food for thought for me for this one when I review it, because that's what's going to end up happening is I'm going to be watching. Future Sarah is watching this now,
Yeah.
and I get a lot from the conversation. But I think, yeah, we're at the natural place to give a good quote to take us out.
And this is why, even though I didn't like Socrates that much, by the time that I identified John as Socrates, I did have I knew that there must be something in Socrates, because this is not Plato. This is introduction to the Apology that I'm going to read from. And these are the things that I've been exposed to, that so I knew there is something special to this man. And it's about his death. At the end, when he is condemned to death, the few words in which he accepts the sentence are in themselves a vivid picture of the man he was, unlike any other there has ever been. Great spiritual leaders and great saints adorn the pages of history, but Socrates is not like any of them. He is, indeed, the servant of the divine power, living in complete obedience to God. Yet he always views the world of men with a bit of humor, a touch of irony. He spends his life in the effort to kindle into a flame the spark of good in every man. But when he fails, when he comes up against blind obstinacy or stupid conceit, or the indifference of egotism, or when he draws down on himself bitter enmity, then along with his regret, because he cares for everyone, is mingled a little amusement, a feeling, as it were, of rueful sympathy, as if he said to himself, "What silly children we are." Socrates never condemned.
I really love that because the first video when we were recording, my niece was screaming outside, and my approach wasn't to like be upset about the interruption, but to, yeah, just see that sweetness of humanity, and our innocence. If we don't get it right,
We're all screaming children.
yeah. Oh, that's great. Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm still enjoying this voyage through the awakening from the meaning crisis, and I hope people that are watching us are watching the series. I'm sure they are because I think it'll be us watching. So this is very meta. But anyway, we'll be back. We'll be back to discuss episode 5 next. And yeah, we hope that you'll join us then. Thank you.